Can society ruin a movie watching experience? Of course, there's instances where a film is spoiled by the public, it's overhyped, or the discourse around the themes or plot points alters the actual story itself. Think Joker or American Psycho. But these are all things that are going to happen in pop culture no matter what. It's simply unavoidable. But can timing, when a film is officially released, alter and even ruin or enhance the film for the audience? See, I should call this video Can Timing Change a Movie, but that title just isn't as catchy. But I finally got around to watching Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut Blink Twice, and while I did enjoy it, I had this constant battle of opinions and deja vu in my head while watching that I felt took away from the actual experience. Maybe it's because my YouTuber brain was turned on, which honestly could completely change the course of film for me forever, but hey, I'm way too far in to look back now. However, I genuinely think this off feeling was bound to happen. This movie didn't feel set up for success, although it was a good film at the end of the day. Make sure to like and subscribe, and let's talk about Blink Twice and the potential importance of timing when it comes to movies. So the reason this film worked so perfectly for my case today is that it had a long journey to get here. I'm not sure exactly how long Zoe had this idea in mind because I've heard in different interviews 7 years, also that it was being written before the Harvey Weinstein allegations, so that could put it up to 8 or 9, but this idea could have been in her head for longer, who knows. And apparently there were many different versions and script rewrites with different endings, different characters, and of course, different titles. But needless to say, it's been in the works for a very long time. And you could imagine that with the subject matter, it may be a hard film to greenlight for some executives, making it take longer to get off the ground. But the film itself is about an event waitress, Frida, who stumbles upon an Instagram reel about a defamed billionaire Slater King, played by Channing Tatum. While working an event with her best friend and roommate Jess, she quite literally stumbles upon him, ending up striking a night-long conversation where the chemistry seems to be at an all-time high. And from the get-go, we get themes of the chase of luxury through the lens of social media manipulation, the preconceived notion that money equals safety, and constant misdirection. Slater King is a tech guru billionaire who has recently been on a press run of reconciliation after going through controversy and cancellation for, well, we don't really get clarity on what the allegations actually are. All we know is that he is known for debauchery, partying, and overall a wild P. Diddy-esque lifestyle. But his charm and what seems like genuine remorse for whatever these actions are enough to convince Frida, Jess, and even us the audience that maybe he is a good guy after all. But his status and money are what Frida is longing for. So when he invites them both on his newly purchased private island getaway, they easily say yes. Now here's where the very solid and somewhat unique structure, pacing, and storytelling comes into play. The first half of the movie kind of flies by and makes us feel like we are actually in the film experiencing what they are. They have a constant everyday cycle of brunch, some drinks by the pool, fancy dinner, and heavy psychedelic drugs ending in a wild trip of a night. And this goes on for what seems like 4 or 5 days when Frida and Jess finally start questioning how long they've actually been here and when they are gonna leave. But everyone seems to be under hypnosis, only replying with surface level responses. Are you having a good time? I needed this vacation. I feel so relaxed and free. Everyone is blinded by the good vibes. And because of the situation, the rollout of this movie, and what we know with these kinds of stories, you're expecting something bad to happen and have this lingering sinister feeling, which does make for a very fun experience looking for clues and waiting in anticipation. We take on the role of Frida as things start to ramp up and she's treated as crazy, but we know she's right, we just don't know really what for. And once someone joins her side, the second half of the movie becomes a very entertaining yet disturbing murder mystery style chase with a pretty insane yet controversial payoff. Now from here, I don't want to spoil the rest of the film if you haven't seen it, but I don't think I need to dive into it to make my main point. But what I will say about the ending is that it does kind of lose its footing. The whole film is kind of a mix of serious and camp, mainly with the dialogue being a little cheesy at points and the very archetypal characters. But with the film having such a strong message and a very compelling story, the last 2 sequences kind of feel too fantastical, which I will get into that more in a second. But this mixed tone does allow for Channing Tatum and Adria Arjona, I think that's how you say it, to actually shine pretty well, as they probably aren't good enough to be in super dramatic roles, even though they do have talent, but are more suited for a comedy or romance. Which does apply more to Channing Tatum, but I think the only things I've seen her in are a comedy/romance. But I just feel like the movie could have gone so much more sinister. Content-wise it does, but tonally not so much. But let's just say this island is evil and the men on it are, well, the worst people you could imagine. And while we're here, I do want to talk about Channing Tatum for a quick second. He really deserves more roles like this, because at a certain point you kind of forget that it's Channing Tatum because he does so well in this style. Again, it's serious but not too serious, there's room for some funny moments, and his natural charm is what fits his character and the story so well. But the ending scene of him yelling "I'm sorry" repeatedly to then switch completely out of character, one, it's pretty good acting, but that sequence encapsulates the entire movie, for better or for worse. There's so many breaks of tension that lead to funny moments where I can't tell how serious the movie is supposed to be. Yet it is very uncomfortable, which that's pretty much Blink Twice in a nutshell. Now, why are we here to talk about timing? So I think if this movie did come out 7 years ago, today we would be talking about how great and ahead of its time it was, possibly even influential. But during this period of it being made, we have gotten so many things like it that it now feels tropey and repetitive. Some movies have been good with similar themes, messages, and storytelling, but the main ones are just as bland as it gets. I saw a review of Blink Twice that simply said, "Don't worry about the menu, darling, get out." Which that is very funny, but that is the best way someone could describe Blink Twice. But it's not fair to call this a retelling of those other films, but that's what it is, because of timing. Now, there's a whole argument about all of art being inspiration, appropriation over appreciation, and in this case, taking your time with art. Like, no movie or art should have a time limit or an expected deadline. But that's my point. This movie feels uninspired because of when it came out. All the themes of eat the rich, the evil side of the elites, chasing luxury, trying to fit into a wealthy or higher class lifestyle, and money not equating safety but actually equating something more sinister, especially in the social media age because that's where a lot of these ideas live, and then you throw hypnotic drugs on top of it. I mean, we've seen this all before. Don't Worry, Darling, The Menu, Infinity Pool, there's hints of Get Out, Black Mirror, Midsommar, Glass Onion, Saltburn, and so many more that have these same social statements in the past 7 years. So this movie just falls under this large umbrella of similar media. And this takes away from the message, the experience, and the talent of Zoe Kravitz, who made a very good debut into filmmaking. I mean, the whole Eat the Rich movement in Hollywood, made by the very people the message is about, selling your opinions back to you for a profit, is a whole conversation in itself. But this movie has more to it and does not entirely fall into this category, but it probably will. There are new things being said, especially with our two female leads and some of what Channing's character represents and goes through, but it's all overshadowed by the veil of this just being another film with the same talking points. Rich men are bad, social media is bad, parasocial relationships with celebrities are bad, elites are evil, and a lot of the elements of the filmmaking feel very copy and pasted as well. The cinematography and dialogue are the two that stand out the most, even though there are some very interesting and unique shots in this movie. And I think Zoe's perspective is a very interesting one to have, given that she was born and raised in Hollywood and the public eye, and would have a different view on a lot of things touched on in the movie and just life in general. Celebrities see a completely different world than we do, and sometimes that can provide really thought-provoking content. But I think this movie has a perspective that would be new and could have been near revolutionary if the timing were right. So yeah, let's just point out the obvious. Blink Twice, whether it likes it or not, is pretty much a thriller about Epstein and P. Diddy. Now, these demonic creatures lurked in the shadows for decades and represented something we kind of knew was true about rich celebrities, but until they were finally caught for their horrendous crimes, it was somewhat of a conspiracy. Now again, this movie and idea, allegedly but pretty much confirmed, was conceived and written before any knowledge of these monsters were public. But because this film came out after, it does just feel like a retelling of these events in movie form. The first comparisons that came to mind as the true nature of Slater King and his group of friends' masks were ripped off was, what if Her came out today? What if Eyes Wide Shut came out today? And what if 1984 was actually 2024 and the book came out in this era? The movie Her correctly predicted predicted the relationship some would have with smartphone technology, as it was still becoming a forefront in this generation's society. Now, while that was an easy prediction to make, the movie has stood the test of time because as we become more advanced and closer to these little bricks in our pocket, the story becomes something of the norm rather than taboo. But when it first came out, it was like a warning or a prophecy that we are now living in. I've seen ads about AI girlfriends. It's a real issue now. Same thing with iRobot, which is not a good movie by any means, but watching it today is like, well, that's kind of where we're actually headed towards. When at the time, these movies lived in a space where they felt like movies, not reality. Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut is now used as evidence for a grand Illuminati conspiracy when, anyone older than me correct me if I'm wrong, the Illuminati was not really something people attached to as a widely held belief in 1999. It was something you may have heard whispers about, almost like a ghost in the corner of the room that you didn't know if it was actually there, to them becoming one of the biggest talking points in early YouTube/social media, with video after video freaking impressionable minds about an all-seeing group of elites controlling our world. These things went from what if that was real to, oh yeah, I've heard about that stuff, it's definitely real. And that brings us to Blink Twice. We now know that there are actually evil elites buying private islands and committing atrocities. It's just the truth of this f***ed up world we live in. But it makes a movie pretty much all about that not seem as interesting or unique and more like a retelling. And that's not the movie's fault or Zoe's fault, but imagine if this movie came out before all this happened like it was supposed to. If we could reference this movie in these situations as being a warning or ahead of its time, I think this movie would get so much more praise. Whereas now, and it hasn't been out that long, but long enough, it seems like it's being swept under the rug. At the end of the day, I didn't find that many flaws with the movie itself. It is a very entertaining watch. But it didn't feel innovative or fresh. It does have something to say. There's a great message about money not equaling safety and also about the rise to the top. I don't want to spoil it, but there is some great symbolism of repeating the cycle when it comes to acquiring extreme wealth. Almost like you have to do bad things or surround yourself in evil circles to get to this level. And it talks about this in an interesting way. But so many other films have said similar things, and again, they didn't do it well, but it makes the messaging of this movie fall kind of flat. Zoe said she likes when movies feel like movies, and that's what she set out to do with this film. And the ending does give us somewhat of that feeling, but when what we are watching is actually reality, the movie loses its charm and serves more as a reminder of what we actually know, or even a response to society. And it's good to do that, and this does a good job of it. But instead of being a case of that's what they were trying to tell us before, it became that's what everyone else has already said. Oh yeah, I can't leave without saying this. Naomi Ackie is great. She is the best part of this movie. I am very excited to see what she does next. But watch the movie, it's fun. It's even fun on a second watch because of all the clues hidden throughout. I definitely think it's worth it, but, you know, try not to think about the other movies that came out before. I guess maybe that's just hard for me, maybe not everybody does that. But let me know what you think, maybe I'm wrong. I'll see you guys soon.
I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!
So we good?